What does Bon Iver do that makes his music so exceptional? Why do his productions speak to us in such a way that we feel like we're being fed some sort of profound truth when listening to his music? And what are some helpful things you and I can learn from the king of indie music? Let's talk about it. Hi, I'm Marcus with the IndieMusicLab.com. Welcome back to another episode of the Artist Analysis series. Today, we're taking a look at one of the most well-known and respected indie artists of all time, and his name is Bon Iver. Now, if you enjoy this video, be sure to let me know in the comments which artists you would like me to analyze next. Let's dive in. One thing that makes Bon Iver's music feel so authentic is he not only allows for imperfection, he embraces and pursues imperfection. He generally only uses autotune when it's that super obvious robotic vocoder effect. Otherwise, what you hear is what you get, and there's none of that metallic autotune-like quality in his vocal mixes. There's that sense of imperfection.
When you're out, tell your lucky one to know to leave.
Another example, notice how the guitar on Skinny Love sounds like it's slightly out of tune. Elaborating on this idea of embracing imperfection, Bon Iver does an incredible job of mirroring our emotions as humans in the context of the art form we call music. You especially hear this on his album 22 A Million, where he's constantly experimenting with these samples and weird sounds and just combining the strangest things together, but that just makes sense to the human ear and to our brains because that is what we're like as human beings. That's emotionally kind of the way we're wired. And Bon Iver really taps into that part of the human psyche by reflecting our emotions like fear and anxiety in this sonic form. It's quite astonishing when you come across an artist like this that can that accurately depict and reflect our human emotions and put it in an art form. Listen to these songs and pay attention to how human and volatile and just emotionally charged these productions are. One thing in particular that makes Bon Iver's melodies so digestible and compelling is how he leverages the power of emptiness. This is a really powerful concept because not only does the emptiness give your ears a break between phrases, but it also works so well because when he does come back in, the melody is so much more powerful because there's less of it. This is kind of like the difference between owning one Ferrari and owning 20 Ferraris. The problem with owning 20 Ferraris is the amount of pleasure you get from each one effectively approaches zero. This hypothetical example is analogous to the classic idea that your greatest strength can very quickly become your greatest weakness. If you start to get a bit narcissistic about how good your melodies are, then you're probably going to fill your song with too many melodies, which then turns your great melody into a weak melody because of how oversaturated it has become. So this paradoxical concept of adding emptiness to your melody structures is a great way to make your melodies more impactful. Have a listen to these songs and notice how much open space there is in these melodic arrangements.
Somewhere, baby, it's part of me, apart from me. Your rain waves the hollow. I keep throwing it down to.
What's the deepest and most widely accepted form of authentic communication? It's not hand gestures, and it's definitely not tomahawk chants at Kansas City Chiefs games.
Like that.
The most authentic form of communication that we all relate to and innately understand is one-on-one conversation. Bon Iver understands the importance of being relatable and conversational with his vocal delivery. And the reason this is so important is because one word in particular, believability. Believability is a sneaky thing because it's so easy to forget. It's much easier to focus on rhyme and lyrics and catchy hooks, but in the process of doing that, we often forget to make our vocals believable. And I'm not even necessarily talking about lyrics, although that's a big part of this, but it doesn't really matter if your lyrics are believable if your vocal delivery isn't. Bon Iver's vocal performances are very similar to conversation in so many ways. Everything from his cadence, to his flow, to his speeding up and slowing down, to his from legato to staccato, all these things. He's got this type of conversational energy that translates into his music, and it makes his music feel and sound more believable. Now that you've got the word believable in your head, listen to these songs and ask yourself this question: does this vocal feel believable?
Oh, you coming, I'll walk now. So please enjoy the feast. Said I would have walked across any thousand lands. I didn't need you that night. I gonna need you anytime. Just gonna take it as it goes. I could go forward in the night, but I better fold my clothes.
One of the ways Bon Iver keeps himself from sounding mainstream and repetitive is how his productions are constantly evolving. He doesn't take the normal pop structure of verse, chorus, bridge, chorus, right? He's much more nuanced and off script with his arrangements. Along the same lines, his songs are produced and mixed in such a way that is very anti-monotonous. And what I mean by that is I've never once skipped a Bon Iver song halfway through because, oh, here's that same repetitive chorus again that I've already heard 3 times. No, there isn't any of that. Now, if you make straight up pop music, then you do actually want to toe that line and get as close as you can to being repetitive without losing the interest of your listener. This is what we talked about when we analyzed Laney in episode 5. But Bon Iver is not a pop artist, and so he's way farther away from that line where repetition turns into boredom because he's very tasteful with his repetitions. Every section of a Bon Iver song will sound different than the section that came before, as well as the section that came after. There are a few exceptions, of course, like his super minimal singer-songwriter classics like Skinny Love and Stacks. But for the most part, Bon Iver doesn't have 2 sections in his song that sound exactly the same. The song is always evolving, and it takes the listener on a journey just like a good story does. See, and I think this is a big reason why there always tends to be this sort of stigma towards mainstream pop music, especially coming from listeners who enjoy more non-conventional artists like Bon Iver, because one of the problems with pop music is oftentimes once you get to the end of chorus 1, you kind of know the whole story. And then the final 2/3 of the song is just like a reiteration of the story that you already know the ending to. But Bon Iver is different. He'll take you on a journey, and he won't give you the punchline, and he won't give you the payoff oftentimes until you're in the back half of the song. And that's a very powerful thing, especially if you don't even want to be known as a mainstream pop artist. If you're not trying to make super catchy pop music that has to hook your listener within the first 15 seconds. I think we tend to forget that there is a very large audience that appreciates artists like Bon Iver. I mean, he's wildly popular, and he doesn't play by the rules of what is on the charts or what is mainstream. And so when it comes to his song structures, he does his own thing. He doesn't care what the rules are. He makes them up as they go, and every individual song essentially has its own autonomy in the sense that you never know what the structure is going to be. Bon Iver's productions aren't particularly easy to analyze and quantify because so much of what goes on is experimentation and happy accidents. He produces his songs and combines sonic textures and flavors in such a way that it's impossible to map that out beforehand. One thing I recommend you do to increase the number of these happy accidents in your own productions is very simple. First, start somewhere. Have some type of basic song structure like a guitar vocal recorded, and then literally hit record and just browse through patches in your synth software or browse through samples and loops and literally record track after track with these random sounds you're discovering on the fly and just go nuts. Then maybe once you have 5, 10, or even 20 tracks, all with different sounds mapped out on your timeline, only then do you want to turn on the analytical part of your brain and start editing and rearranging and deleting what's not working and keeping what is, and using automation and things like that. I try to do this on every single song I produce, and it's such an exhilarating exercise. It's one of my favorite parts of the music production process. This is the same kind of advice you would get from any professional creative writer. What do they always say? Don't edit while you're creating. You have to turn off that perfectionistic side of your brain and just get into that flow and stay in that flow as long as possible. And you can't allow yourself to be held back by trying to edit and overanalyze what you're doing when you're in that flow state. And so this is a very similar thing. You're just going nuts. You're pulling in samples and browsing through sounds, recording random stuff, putting it all on the timeline, and then going back later to edit it and to keep what you want to keep. So for every song you produce, you should be spending at least 1 full hour on straight up experimentation and straight up just throwing caution to the wind and seeing what the heck you could possibly come up with. Seeing what's the craziest sound you could come up with and see if it works. Most of the time it's not going to, but you're never gonna know if you don't experiment. And that's what Bon Iver does. And that's a big part of what makes his music sound so creative. And I think the phrase that's very much worth contemplating about here is the phrase I mentioned earlier, and that is happy accidents. Because that's a lot of what this is. It's not like you think it up in your head and then you put that into the song. That's not how this works. Creativity comes from doing things, from trying things, from trial and error. That is how you get these creative productions. So Bon Iver, who comes from the middle of Wisconsin, is a fascinating success story. And speaking of the word story, I think what Bon Iver is best at is telling stories in fresh and creative ways. Everything from his lyrics to the chord choices to the production and the vocal performances, you really do feel like he's telling stories through his music in a way that no one has ever really done before. It's that uniqueness and that type of exploratory mindset that really sets Bon Iver apart. He's at the top of the indie music pyramid for a really good reason. The most important reason being this: when you listen to a song from Bon Iver, you believe it. Alright, thanks so much for watching. Now, if you enjoy this video and you want to learn more about music production, then I've got a gift for you. It's a free guide. It's called the 5 Steps to a Spotify Level Production. This guide will give you a simple 5-step roadmap to take your next song from start to finish and to make it so good that if it's uploaded to Spotify, it can play with the big boys. It can, if it's queued up right after a Bon Iver song, it'll sound like a natural fit, like it's supposed to be there. That's the goal. That's what I'm trying to help you with here at the Indie Music Lab. So if you're trying to get there faster, be sure to download that and use it on your next song to make it as good as possible. Link is in the description. Thanks so much for watching. Have an amazing day. Happy music making.